This is She Creates Business, a podcast for wedding pros. Your host, Kinsey Roberts, interviews incredible women in the wedding industry who are making their mark and creating success on their terms. Join the conversation.
Hello, and welcome to episode 114 of She Creates Business, a podcast for wedding pros. This is your host, as always, Kinsey Roberts. I appreciate you being here today and every day. You guys, this is, you just make this so much fun. Thank you to everybody who sent DMs in the last week. Thanks to everybody who gave me some feedback on Tuesday's episode. I was talking with my friend Ruth. If you haven't listened to episode 113, it's 4 things you might want to consider adding to your contract. And I don't know what was wrong with me that day, but I went back and listened to the episode because I kind of had just had a weird feeling that I sounded strange, like maybe I was tired or I don't know. Anyway, I asked my friend Ruth, I said, did you think that Tuesday's episode was a little preachy or something? I felt I don't know, I just felt weird about it. And she was like, no, you always just say what you think in the moment. So just leave it up. Don't be weird about it. But the content was good. I just don't know if I sound like a weirdo. So if you haven't listened, head back to episode 113. There's some great little nuggets of things you might want to add to your contract or, just maybe processes or procedures you want to implement into your business to give yourself more time. Today, I'm excited to bring and finally publish an episode that I recorded back in the spring with Kelly Ewell from 48 Fields. She is a venue owner, and back in the spring, before I took a break from the podcast, I was going to do a whole series on venue owners. And so at the beginning of this episode, you'll kind of hear that. I decided not to do this series, and then I took that extended break through the summer, but this is still such a fun episode, and it's actually such perfect timing because the Venue Academy from my friend Lindsay Lucas is getting ready to open on Tuesday, October 9th, 2018. If you're listening to this in the future, still take a peek at my website because I know Lindsay will be updating that course and opening it a couple of times a year. But in current day, that's opening Tuesday, October 9th. And being a venue owner, Kelly had so much great insight to share, and I really enjoy talking shop, as they say, with fellow vendors, and this was no exception. And Kelly has something great coming up for venue owners here in a few months. I'm not going to spill the beans yet, but she has something really, really exciting, and I can't wait to share it with you guys and share it with my own audience, and I know that you'll really appreciate it. Before we get started, I just want to remind you that I have a wait list happening for the Venue Academy before it opens. And actually, I've decided I think I've mentioned this, I'm going to publish a full episode on the Venue Academy, what it includes, what my bonuses are going to be for anyone who purchases through my affiliate link, and all of the cool things you'll get through the Venue Academy. If you are a vendor who has wanted to open a venue, if you think it might be in your future, if you think it might be in the cards, I really think the Venue Academy is for you. Even if you're a current venue owner and you really want to sit down, write a new business plan, get some additional funding, have some one-on-one time with me so that we can share our experiences and help each other through the venue experience, the Venue Academy is for you too. And Lindsay is just going to keep adding to it. It's just going to keep getting better and better, and you have lifetime access to it. So I am going to do a whole episode on the Venue Academy. What I've actually decided to do is record it privately. I'm going to send it to the people who are on the wait list first. So if you're not on the wait list right now, go ahead and hop on the wait list. It's at shecreatesbusinesspodcast.com. Click the Venue Academy link at the top, jump on the wait list, and then as I'm recording this, it's October 4th. 2018. So tonight, probably around, 6 or 7 p.m., I'm going to send that podcast episode privately to the waitlist only, and then I'll publish it publicly on Tuesday, October 9th, when Lindsay is doing her webinar on that day as well. And that way they kind of line up together. But the waitlist folks, you've been on the waitlist, you've been amazing, and now I have all of the information for you, so you will get the goods first. So if you're not on the waitlist, get on the wait list before 6 o'clock tonight. I'll put this on Instagram as well. If you're listening to this in the future, these dates are irrelevant and deprecated, but get over on the website and see when the Venue Academy opens again, or just shoot me a DM on Instagram. I'm always on there. You can find me at She Creates Business. Okay, enough about that. I want to talk to you about Kelly. This was an incredible conversation. She is a brilliant woman. She's so kind, and dang, she runs her business well. And what I loved about this conversation is that it was so fulfilling to talk to another venue owner. We didn't agree on everything. We do things differently in our venue. And I loved that so much because we were both like, oh, you're doing it that way? That's great. I'm doing it this way. And we could still move on and have such an amazing conversation. And that's what I like about Kelly. She is so open to new ideas and she's so giving of her time and information. Let me tell you a little bit about her before we get to the episode. Kelly is the owner of 48 Fields, a century-old farm estate set in the heart of Virginia wine country. The venue focuses on working with couples who want to give their guests a relaxed but thoughtful countryside wedding experience. Having previously been a wedding photographer for 10 years, Kelly has experienced a lot when it comes to weddings, from the highs of seeing a surprise return of a loved one from deployment to the lows of no-show vendors and dropped cakes. She can pin a boutonniere in record time, is a master of logistics, and still tears up every time a bride walks down the aisle, especially if it's to the classic Canon in D, played by a string quartet. Kelly holds a business degree from the University of Richmond that she put to use for many years when she worked in corporate marketing. When she's not hosting weddings at 48 Fields, she can be found visiting Northern Virginia wineries with her husband Steve and their dog Piper. Without further ado, let's go to the show. Kelly, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on with you.
You are so welcome. We were just talking offline and I said, we need to hit record because we're talking about a lot of great things here that will be great. As you guys know, we are right in the middle of the venue owner series, and I'm pleased to have Kelly from 48 Fields here. She's a venue owner. And Kelly, you know, I gave everyone kind of that professional bio at the beginning of the show, but especially in this series, where I like to start is kind of the journey and what brought you to being a venue owner. I mean, we don't have to go all the way back to like, well, I was working in corporate. Sometimes I do that, but you know, what brought you to being a venue owner, and to what was the impetus for 48 Fields?
Well, actually, I will. So I will start a little bit further back because I think it all leads up to where we are now. I've had a little bit of a winding path to becoming the venue owner. I started off in TV production and marketing, so a lot of logistics, a lot of planning. Definitely a marketing side will always help you when you're a small business owner. Mm-hmm. I lived in the DC area. I still do. And it's not a TV production hub. And I didn't want to live in New York or LA. I had done a stint up in New Jersey working for NFL Films, but I had just started dating my now husband, and it was a contract position. So I ended up moving back to DC to be with him. And luckily it all worked out. I had this moment where I had to decide what was I going to do with my life. Yes. And had this realization that I've been working with everybody else's photos and videos for so long that, you know, why couldn't I do that myself? I'm a creative person. So I started studying photography and had an internship with a wedding photographer. And so I got into wedding photography, and I did that for 10 years. And I loved every moment of it. I still do. I still do shoot a little bit. But as I get older, I won't deny the fact that I am getting older. You know, photography is rough on the body when you're moving around for 8, 9, 10 hours a day and carrying all that equipment, and editing is just a very daunting process. So I could foresee the future that wedding photography after 10 years was probably not going to take me another 10 years down the road. But I loved weddings so much, and I wanted to find a way that I could continue in that industry. Mm-hmm. And I would come home from all of these weddings and tell my husband, you know, all these great things about the weddings and the couples, but I would also talk about the venues and what I loved and maybe what I didn't and how I would do it better, and just everything started revolving around the venue. And my husband has a background in doing events. He's done corporate events for a while. And, you know, it was all these late night conversations where he's half asleep and I'm still energized from coming home from weddings. And, you know, one night those questions just turned into, you know, what would happen if we did this ourselves? Why couldn't we do it ourselves? Mm-hmm. So we started looking around. And I would say it was a fairly fast process. We looked around for about 6 months for a property. Went so far as to meet with our county, which is a whole other process in itself. And we found a property. It was really everything that we wanted. And we did end up with it. I remember it was March. And we had looked at it and we did our due diligence. We had a structural engineer come out, and the last thing you want to do is have a venue collapse, because it was an old barn and we wanted to make sure it was safe for doing weddings, obviously, number one priority. So we did our due diligence, and it was August by the time that we put our offer in. The property was still available. It was owned by 4 sisters, and this was their inheritance, and so every dollar mattered to them. And but they wanted nothing to do with the property. It had fallen into ruin. It was abandoned for at least 10 years. So it was a property that we knew was going to be a long-term investment, that we had to do a lot of work to renovate. So we put our offer in of August. They did not come back with an offer until November.
Oh, wow.
So we waited that whole time. And then it was New Year's Eve of 2013, I believe, that we closed on it. So literally new year, new adventure was waiting for us when that calendar turned. So that was a very long answer of how we got into becoming wedding venue owners.
No, I love that. And that's so interesting that you and your husband really have this perfect mix of past experience that makes you a great team for owning a venue.
We like to think so.
Yeah. I'm wondering the old barn was on the property, which is great. So that existed, but the property was kind of like deprecated. How many acres did you end up purchasing?
So it's 48 acres. That's where the name 48 Fields comes from. Clever. But there are 3 barns and 2 houses on the property. The original farmhouse dates back to 1910, and every one of those buildings needs a lot of love. So we are about 4 years into ownership. Actually, this past New Year's Eve was 4 years. And our main barn was obviously our first focus, because that's the main reception site. And we are very nearly done with it. It's just little things here and there. It's like a house renovation. I don't know if anything will ever really be done. But we started doing weddings the summer of 2016. We had some friends who just wanted a casual wedding. They convinced us that we were ready for them to have their wedding there. It was about a year ahead of schedule of where we thought we would be, though. So one thing led to another, word of mouth, and photographers would come out and do photo shoots. So our name just started getting out there. And before we knew it, we were open hosting weddings. And 2017 was our first full year, and we're pretty much sold out for 2018 right now.
That's wonderful. And so the venue, is it outside of DC?
It is. It's in a little town called Leesburg. It's about an hour west of DC.
Oh, okay, right. That makes sense. So what's your season there? How did you, well, let me back up a little bit. We kind of talked about you're booked now. 2017 was your first full year. You're fully booked for 2018, essentially. Let's kind of unpack how your name got out there a little bit. I mean, photographers were coming, word of mouth was happening. Let's unpack that a little bit and dig into that. So what did that really look like? How did the photographers contact you? Was it all just really word of mouth? What other marketing aspects have you kind of incorporated to make 48 Fields more visible in your local market?
So it was a very deliberate effort on my part. As soon as we purchased the property, I bought the website and the domain and set that up, really just to document a little bit of our journey. But also I knew that for SEO purposes, it would be important to have a website that had history and that was active. And, even if it wasn't every day, that there were updates being made, and it would show Google that we were an entity that was out there worthy of looking at. So that was one part. Like I said, I was a wedding photographer, and so I was certainly tapped into that community. And in our area, it's popular for locations that people go to charge a permit fee. And so it was kind of a bone of contention among the photographers here that they really didn't want to be paying for these permit fees.
What is that?
So I thought, so if you go to a park, you have to pay an hourly fee or a flat rate that the park will then let you in and take photos because you're a commercial entity and you're, making money off of being in their property. So therefore they want to get money out of you for it.
Oh, gotcha. So if you're taking engagement photos or something in state park land or something like that.
Yes.
Okay. I hear you. Okay, cool. Keep going.
So it's this kind of conversation that goes on in our area here that a lot of photographers don't want to be paying these fees. Right. So I thought, okay, well, I I realize this, and I want our name to be out there. I want people to be coming. So I would put out there that photographers could come book time at our farm and use our fields and our buildings. No fee, but they would have to give me photos of their session in return that I could put on social media and blog about. So I had content to be putting out there. So that is a little bit another way that we started. I also planned a bunch of styled shoots so that, I could take the photos that I wanted. I could create the imagery that I wanted to have out there, and again, have more content to be posting and having our name out in the community.
Mm-hmm. So do you feel like you spent a decade in the industry as a photographer. Do you feel like your connections in the industry prior to purchasing the property was really helpful?
Yes and no.
Okay.
I mean, it definitely helped knowing photographers, mm-hmm. and, I take that back. Yes, it definitely helps because I know who's a good vendor. I know who's quality. I know there are some out there that I don't jive with. I know who I can recommend to our couples. And I think they have a respect knowing that I know the industry. And so they take our recommendations more seriously. And they know that people aren't buying their way onto our list, that it is our reputation on the line when we say that XYZ vendor is somebody who's really going to serve them well.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. Do you have, let's see, what was one thing I wanted to just shine a light on. So listening into this, you guys, if you haven't started your venue yet, or you are really close to, putting up getting the property closed on, or you have a dream to start a venue in the future, one thing that Kelly said that I love is that she started her site before the venue was ready, her website, and I assume your social handles as well. I think you said that too. Before it was even done. So, and we did the same thing at Vista View Events. We had nothing, like our property, like the land was still blank, and I basically just posted like construction updates on social media and on the website. But I just love how you said, I knew SEO would be important, and so I wanted to gain that credibility and that kind of legacy history on Google. And so smart. Everyone should do that.
I think I would cringe if I go back and looked at the beginning posts of what I was putting up there. I think our feed is much more consistent and pretty at this point. But it was something we had to start somewhere. Everybody starts somewhere.
Oh my gosh, yes. And I don't think we should let that stop us. I was just one of the girls I toured a couple weekends ago. She is a 2018 bride. She actually told me, I didn't know this, she came back for a second tour because we were talking about setup, and she actually mentioned that, that would have been 2016. She actually mentioned that she saw us on Facebook from one of the construction updates when we were still just like framing, basically. Like the frame, you could tell kind of what it was going to look like, I think, because the roof must have been on. But she screenshotted one of those construction update pictures that was just our frame because she was like, oh, this looks like it's going to be really beautiful. She wasn't even engaged yet.
But you know what? That made her invested in your story, yes. And she's followed you along, and she has that connection to you.
That's
and
right. So don't
cared
let it
enough
stop
you.
You. Yeah. If you don't have perfect content, nobody cares. Okay, so I love that. Started the website. The 10 years experience was helpful. You knew kind of what you wanted your aesthetic to be. Once you started booking those first couple of weddings, and I know you were in the industry for a long time, and so I feel like you do have an advantage here, but is there anything that you did that you would recommend that other venue owners do? I mean, we kind of talked about like business structure and all of that. What do you think is kind of like those first just couple of steps that are super important?
If you are starting a venue or building a venue or turning a building that is not previously a venue into a venue, you have to know and love and become best friends with your local building department. I would say is a very high likelihood that you are going to be talking with them a lot. I'm not in construction, but I have had a huge learning curve just getting through zoning codes and building requirements and fire code and health and water quality, whatever you could think of, there's a rule for it. So much so that there is a rule, at least where I live, of how many trees you need to have in your parking lot to be considered acceptable. Wow. So they will come up with anything and everything for you to have to adhere to. Mm-hmm. And, the last thing I always told my husband that I want to do this right. Sometimes it feels like you're getting punished for following the rules and for doing things the way you're supposed to, but I never want to be in a situation where a bride has booked us a year out and something isn't done right or comes to light that, I don't even know what it is. So we have been very conscious about trying to find out in advance before we do any kind of project, before we do any kind of renovation, what kind of standards and codes do we need to adhere to and what kind of inspections and all of that. And it definitely takes longer and it definitely causes more headaches, but you have that peace of mind that you're going to be able to be sustainable in the future because of it.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. That is so brilliant. What's one other thing aside? That's huge, you guys. If you haven't started yet, that's just going to happen to you. What's another thing, maybe on the business running side of a venue, that you think has really served you well?
It's a little bit controversial out here.
Get controversial, Kelly.
We, from the very beginning, we have always required that a vendor who is going to be on site has to be licensed or insured at the very least, and they need to provide us proof of this insurance. And there are definitely venues around here that do that. I would say maybe not the majority. It might be increasing and more are doing it as time goes by. But it's something that I came across on my wedding photography side, that I would go work at a venue and they would request proof of my insurance. And it's a very sound business decision for that venue to make. And so I knew that from the beginning, I wanted to protect ourselves as much as possible. I knew that we wanted to work with quality professional vendors. And so I made that a requirement, that if you're going to work at 48 Fields, that you need to be able to provide me proof of insurance. And I would say 99% of our vendors have no issue with it. We had one who put up a big fight and thought it didn't apply to her. And, she was funny enough, this was a photographer. She was a portrait photographer. She doesn't shoot weddings, and so therefore that doesn't apply. And in my head, I'm thinking, you don't shoot weddings. Like, I need this from you more than ever, because what if you don't know what you're doing? And, I just saw like big red flags. So, we got it all worked out, but I would say something from the business, that is definitely something from the business side that was important to me to do from the beginning.
Love it. Yes, we do too. I don't know. I can't really speak for other venues. I would imagine. We also don't require everyone to be a professional. Like I just know so many planners who started, and this might change for us, but one of the things that we don't require, like, your wedding planner to be like the planner. That's what they do for a living. Because I just know so many planners who got their start, like, who are amazing now running huge businesses, but they were like, I got my start like planning my own wedding, planning my friends' weddings. So I don't really want to like discount those folks at all. It's kind of why I started the podcast, but we haven't really had an issue. And if they don't have insurance or a license, we just make them sign a waiver that's like, you're not responsible for my equipment.
Yeah. See, that's smart too, that to have that alternative option. To me, I don't know, I kind of disagree with you a little bit.
No, I love it. Tell me.
Because to me, a planner, you're on site one of the longest amount of times of a vendor. You're going to every part of the venue. You're interacting with every other vendor. You're there for the couple. You're kind of like their main representative. So a planner to me is somebody who I will never make an exception for about having insurance. I don't know. Maybe that's a little too strict of a line, but that's kind of how we've been.
I don't think so. I don't think that's a strict line at all, particularly if you require a professional planner. I think that that's totally valid and important if they're running their business that way. You know what I mean? Like, it makes complete sense.
So, yeah, we haven't had an issue with it so far. Hopefully, knock on wood, it'll continue.
Won't. I don't think you will. No, I think that's wonderful. And like we were kind of talking offline how we were both saying that really like business structure, Like, I feel like structure is more freedom even sometimes. I mean, that sounds silly, but I feel like structure is freedom because the guidelines are just so clear. There's no like gray area. You know what I mean?
I think it can bring almost peace or
Yes.
a level of comfort because you know what, as a couple, you know what you can and can't do.
Yes.
There's no question about it. You just plan your wedding accordingly.
Yes. And same for vendors. So absolutely brilliant. You know what? We were also, I keep saying, you guys, I'm not kidding. We had like a 20-minute conversation offline. We were also chatting, Kelly, about the guide that so you've gotten tons of questions, it sounds like, from other people who were like, hey, I mean, it's just like this podcast, like, hey, what is it like to own a venue? I might like to do that someday. And you were kind enough to create kind of a 5-tip guide that is available on your website. I will link it up in the show notes, you guys, because it's wonderful. And I would love to run through those 5 tips if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
Cool.
Yeah, so it is an ebook. The 5 tips I would give to people who are looking to start their own wedding venue. Some of them are practical. Some of them are a little more lofty or hard to pin down. But the first one is, dream big. Know what you want to do. Yes, you want to have a wedding venue, but really, what does that look like? What does that mean to you? Will it be a year-round venue? Will it be seasonal? You have to find your drive because this is going to be a very hard thing to pull off. Yeah. So having passion is one thing, but you have to be persistent and relentless and embrace patience. And so the first step is really just getting into the mindset of everything that's going to come with this, because there's definitely going to be challenges along the way. And as great as it is to own a wedding venue and run one, it is definitely not all rainbows and roses.
Totally. Hit me with number 2.
Yeah. Number 2 is, if you're not already in the wedding industry, you need to learn what it's about. Familiarize yourself with what's going on. From the very basic of how many other wedding venues are there around you, how far out are they booking, what are they charging, their capacity. Questions like this are going to help you understand what brides and grooms in your area are looking for. What are the standards? What are they expecting? And how are you going to fit in with that? So all this information is going to give you extra knowledge, but it's really up to you to evaluate that. And what I mean by that is, so where our venue is located, it is on the same street, same road that hosts 2, maybe 3 other wedding venues, one of which is another barn, 2 of which I am on the preferred vendors list as a photographer. So that seems like it could scare some people away until you take a step back and look at the fact that, we're pretty much booked for 2018. So there's room for everybody is what I'm saying. Take the knowledge that you gain and then learn how that's going to apply or affect you if it does.
Yes, absolutely. And when you do that, when you find out, what people are charging, I don't think that's not a blanket reason like, okay, here's all of the things everyone else is doing, so I'm just going to do those things. I don't think that's what Kelly is saying. I think you still need to find your UVP, your unique value proposition, and how you fit into that market, but also how you stand out to the client, because that's the most important thing.
Yes, definitely.
It's beautiful. Number 3.
Number 3 is determining your budget and coming up with your risk tolerance. So for us, we bought this place that had been abandoned and needed renovation, serious renovation. My husband and I are both working full time. We had a house with a mortgage already. We took out a mortgage to buy the second place. We did not want to take on any more loans. We felt that, this was kind of tapping us out. We had a pretty comfortable lifestyle, and we really didn't want to change that. We knew this was going to be a project, but we wanted to do it kind of on our own terms. So, we came up with a budget of what we could spend on renovations every year, but then you need to think about, do you have school loans that are going to be coming due? Do you anticipate adding children to your family? What other things, if you know you're going to be doing renovations and building, that's a multi-year process. So what is coming down the pike for you within those times? And what are you going to be comfortable with? So that's all something that you need to wrap your head around as you're taking this dive.
Oh, yes. I appreciate you being so candid about that, because it's so important. Owning a venue is not like, I don't know. Well, we've been talking about wedding planners. So if you're a wedding planner, you guys, I know that you invest in your business. I'm just saying, like, you could just start a website and be a wedding planner. Like, that's the reality. Owning a venue, oh boy, there is a lot of costs that go into that. Even if you already own the property like we did, there was still a ton of costs. So I appreciate that tip.
And the other thing about your budget is, how tied in do you want to get with other people? Are you going to take out loans? Are you going to borrow from family? Are you going to look for an investor? Are you going to max out your credit cards? I would not recommend maxing out your credit cards. But, we thought, this is our project. We're taking this on. We don't want to go to our family and ask for money because this is our project, not theirs. We didn't want to make them feel obligated. We didn't want to bring on an investor because we didn't want to, we didn't know what our profitability was going to be. We didn't want to be on the line to be paying anything back or having to answer to other people. So an investor was out. So, it's very focused and thoughtful discussions that you need to have, before you decide how this is going to happen.
Yeah. And what the timeline is too for when you open. If you are going to self-fund your venue and it takes you time to save, or it takes you time to gather the funds from other sources that, you personally have, like other streams of income. Are you comfortable with that amount of time? Like Kelly was just saying, like, they closed on this property in 2013, but your first full year was 2017.
Right.
Yeah. So I think it's important to kind of look at that. And are you okay with that timeline?
Very much. And I am not a patient person. When I want something, I kind of want it right then. So this has definitely been a true test of my patience.
Nice. What's the next tip?
All right. Number 4 is one that I was adamantly against, is hire an architect who is experienced in your type of project. Okay. So like I said, I did not want an architect. To me, we were renovating. We weren't adding on anything new. We weren't building anything. Why did we need an architect? But I slowly gave in to my husband and his parents and my parents and pretty much everybody else who said that we needed an architect. And now looking back, I can say that is probably one of the best decisions that we made, because even though you're renovating, you still, like I said, have to go through your building and development department, or at least we do around here. And they all need drawings and they all need plans to be submitted. So an architect has to do those. But on the other side, we can always call our architect and say, you know what, we need to redo our plumbing, or we need some electrical work. Who have you worked with that's been really great? And so our architect gives us wonderful suggestions all the time of how, even if he's not involved in the project, he knows people in the industry who can help us. And we were very particular with who we selected as our architect. We chose somebody who was local. So anytime we had to go out to the property, he was right there. He wasn't coming in from DC. He was already in the town that we live in. He's done work. He had a portfolio that he could show us of work that he's done on other barns, other wineries, other rural properties. And it's a small firm, so we know that we're always going to be working with the same architect and not a team and not bouncing around from people to people. So those are all important factors to us with how we chose ours.
Mm-hmm. And how did you find him? Did you just Google search, or what did you do there?
We did. We started with a Google search. But, like I said, having barn and rural property experiences and renovations, those were, even though we started with the Google search, those were all the things that we were looking for as we were evaluating, the results that came up.
Yeah, you bet. What's the 5th tip?
All right, 5, last one is to not only make a list of your to-do list, but prioritize. Okay, hold on. We're going to start that over. All right. So number 5, the last tip is to not only make your to-do list, but come up with how you're going to prioritize those tasks. For us, everything was a priority, it seemed like. Yeah. Our barn had no doors. It had no windows. It needed new electrical. It needed new plumbing. It needed foundation work. It needed new flooring. All very big, key things before you can even get to the fun part of decorating and hosting weddings. So how do we determine it? Well, we decided doors and windows are important, because if we couldn't secure our barn, then we were at the risk of everything that we did inside becoming, stolen or ruined, or I don't know. These are worst case scenarios, but securing our barn from the outside was kind of a key priority, and then we moved inside. Sure. I can remember it was probably about a year or so ago, we wanted to install a new ceiling on our lower level because we had to tear it out in the beginning. But before we could do that, we had to install the floors upstairs so that all the banging and hammering wouldn't just pile up on the ceiling. But before we could install the floors, we needed to put on a new roof so the roof wouldn't leak onto the new floors. But before we could put up the ceiling, we also had to do this protective coating on the old wood beams. So, it's kind of this domino chain effect of thinking about how all your projects are going to link into one another and all the different things that you have to do before you can get up and running. So it's really looking at the long game and planning out, not just your next few weeks or few to-dos. It's what's your master to-do list and how are you going to prioritize that so you don't do something and then 3 months later go, oh gosh, why did we do that way? That totally messes up what we want to do now. That was our biggest fear.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. What you said, just play the long game. That is that wraps up that point in a nice little bow. Play the long game. That's what having a venue is. So tell me, you mentioned a couple of times that you're booked for this year. We're as we record in 2018. What is your season there in Leesburg?
So it is now year-round. We have been fortunate that about a month ago, we finally had heating and air conditioning installed. So we have had some really frigid temperatures here this winter, so we have been putting it to the test and have been very happy with the way it's been working. So we are now able to host weddings year-round. And even, you probably experienced this too, that you could have a month like September and October, which is always very popular because they're such beautiful months, but you could have a very freakishly hot day or a very oddly cold day in a month where you don't expect it. So having the heating and air conditioning, I think, is going to be helpful at any time of year.
Oh, that's exciting. I can't wait to hear how that goes this year. Our building is not temperature controlled right now, so I'm excited for you to let me know how that goes. I feel like that will be a huge hit.
Yes, definitely. We're hoping so.
Cool. Well, and you don't have to give us numbers or anything, but can you kind of give us an idea of how many weddings you host or how many weekends or what does your booking look like as far as we offer weddings, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday only or whatever?
Right. Well, I try not to do Friday weddings because a lot of times that's when they want to do the rehearsals. Having this venue was a very intentional thing for us. And it was kind of this pie in the sky dream. And so having that dream also meant having a dream life, which means we're not out there to be the venue that books triple header weekend weddings. And, if we need to take a weekend off and just do nothing, that we want to be able to have that freedom or that luxury because, in the end, this is our own business that we can craft it however we want. So we try not to book every weekend. Like I said, we don't book Friday weddings. Sunday weddings are always not as popular as Saturdays. So it's not like we're doing both a Saturday and Sunday weddings. We definitely do that throughout the year, but I don't think it's a consistent thing.
That's wonderful. I love the way you said that. You can kind of craft it the way you want to. That sounds so lovely. Yes. Do you have anything to add for our future venue owners?
It is like anything that you're passionate about. It has its high and its low points, and there are going to be days where you wonder, why did you get into this and what made you think that this was a good idea? But know that those moments pass. And, when you have a bride walking down the aisle or you see your space transform throughout the day as tables and chairs and decor and flowers and everything comes together and it goes from an empty space to somebody's wedding, those are some of my favorite moments. And, that's when you take a step back and say, oh my gosh, we did it.
Kelly, you are so right. Thank you so much for this conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's so much fun to talk to another venue owner, and you are so insightful. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Well, thank you. This has been fantastic. I always love talking with other venue owners and wedding industry people. I could go on for days.
Me too. We'll have to have a part 2 or something because I feel like we're almost cutting it short, even though we're at time.
I love it. Yes, definitely.
Cool. Thank you so much, Kelly. Have a good night.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to She Creates Business. Please take a minute and head to iTunes to leave an honest review so we can help more wedding pros find the show.